have you. And this is the kind of lifestyle that she was offered and didn't want anything to do with it. That already is tantamount to being called a devil worshiper in those days, or somebody who needed the treatment, to hose you down or dunk you down. I mean, and I don't think things are really much different today when it really comes to it. But you can imagine a girl brought up in the 1800s who was introverted, sensitive, scholarly, knowledgeable, mediumistic, a female, and then at the same time a genius. I don't think you're going to win too many friends. And this is exactly what happened. And it's part of the reason why she took off. It's one of the reasons why she got on horseback and buggered off to Egypt first, I think it was, and then tried to make her way, from there over into India. Then that didn't work because they actually didn't let her into Tibet. What people don't realize is that the British government officials didn't like her or something, and some controversy happened. And it's in her official biographies that have been written by A.P. Sinnott. He's the one that really has the goods on her. A.P. Sinnott. In fact, do you realize that for up until she was almost 50 years of age, Madame Blavatsky was pretty much unknown in the world?
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, it was only until very late in her life. Certainly history would have easily forgotten about her. It's just that a guy called A.P. Sinnott went to Russia and interviewed her folks and tried to put some information together because he had found out about her, and that got her notoriety. She was known in her time, of course, to the small circle. She had formed the Theosophical Society, and she had written her books. But what that means is that you get your moment, you get your 15 minutes of fame, and then you die away. In a historical context, people were forgetting about her. So she wasn't as super famous as a lot of the other people that came along afterwards, you see. So her name was sort of was falling aside, by the wayside. And it was because of A.P. Sinnott's book and a few other things that, again, secured her name a little bit more, But her idea to run, to leave and to travel, she went to Mexico. She spent lots and lots of time in America, as you said. Got to know some very interesting people there, some of them wealthy and some of them not so. And went to live even with Native American Indians. Took lots of notes, you see, went around the world. And so again, a woman in those days, that was not common, especially for a woman who didn't really have a lot of wealth. And so having that kind of knowledge, having that kind of experience is extremely rare. How many people, for instance, in the Eastern Bloc, how many women from the Third World in those days ever traveled into the West to have that kind of experience? And how many people from the West, women, were able to, just like Marco Bloody Polo, take off and visit the entire world, not just the world, not just nightclubs in Miami, but go to ancient sites like Palenque, go over to Knossos, go over to Thebes, go over to Tibet. Very, very few. So by the time that this lady was 20 years of age or 25 years of age, she had more knowledge, more worldly experience than probably everyone she ever met. And then she went into counseling. She used to have these people come to her home. She'd do readings, she'd do consultations. And most of those backstabbing, I'm not going to use my Irish, but most of those backstabbing people would then go away, and they'd be the very ones, Chris, to write her up and criticize her and say all sorts of slanderous things. All the people she entertained.
Amazing.
Yeah. Her secretary, J.R.S. Mead, said that there wasn't a thing in her house that she didn't give to her guests. If her guests came to her premises, her house, everything was theirs. She had open house all the time. She was one of the most generous people that she ever knew. She lavished gifts and favor and time and energy on her friends openly, and was an extremely humanitarian person, and was very, very tolerant of some of the freakiest people coming to badger her with her life story. And therefore, and then the most saddest thing of all, which often follows genius types, is that these are the very people then who go to the journalists and the newspapers and the scandal mongers, you see, and talk about her this and her that and all sorts of weirdness. She smokes too many cigarettes. My goodness, she's very fat. She doesn't care about her appearance, etc., etc., etc. So, you're dealing with layers and layers and layers of scandal. It's just, and I put it down to the same fate as what women suffered in those days. This is the reason why the George Eliots and the Jane Austens had to, in the early days, change their names to write as men. Emily Bronte had to do it. Charlotte Bronte had to do it. There's barely a female writer that you can think of until you come up to the time of, say, the Gothic novel with, Mary Shelley, and what's her name? The one who originated the Gothic novel was actually a woman. That's an interesting subject, by the way. Anne something, I can't remember her name right now. But that's quite late. That's already, you're well into the middle of the 1900s. Previous to the 19th century, women could barely use their own name when they wrote even a book or a novel.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah,
Wow.
it says to be born in mind.
Let me ask your take on this. Somebody in the chat room is asking, what do you think about Manly P. Hall?
I've learned a lot from Manly Palmer Hall. His book was a friend in California gave me his book in 1981. It was a really big, in those days it was the oversized hardback. They kind of made it smaller now, The Secret Teachings of All Ages. And the reason why I like that book and like that work is because number one, it's really good. It's really well written. And also is because that book, if you read it, will save you 30 years reading a load of other junk. He compresses so much into that one book, The Secret Teachings of All Ages. He's written many others, of course. That is a very good book to use to help the beginner. And I've often even given that book to associates, people that have shown an interest. I will always recommend that to them because it's so good for that purpose as a reference book. Again, I'm not that up on a lot of the other stuff he wrote or what his own order was into. But again, see, the other thing about Manly Palmer Hall was that even though he was a Freemason and things like that, he also spoke about the dark side of these secret societies. And I have great respect for insiders who do that. In fact, my work wouldn't even exist without these insiders because there's really not that much information that you can go to that's legitimate just on the street level when you get into conspiracy, unfortunately. You're going to end up going to the Carol Quigleys and the generals, and the priests and the clergymen and the whistleblowers from within. And I put Manly Palmer Hall into that category. We've learned more from an Aldous Huxley. We've learned more from a Lieutenant Colonel James Bogue-Wrights. We've learned, and this is happening right now, as a matter of fact. There's whistleblowing books by, like Webley, what's his name, Smedley Butler, War is a Racket, and so many others I could name if I had the time. These are insiders. They've been behind the veil of national security. They know firsthand. They've wined and dined with the lieutenants of the Black Lodge. They have sat beside the politicians. They've overheard. They know things from within, and therefore their books are of maximum importance. And therefore I put people like Manly Palmer Hall in that category. They traveled the world. Doors were open to them that were not open to everybody else. And therefore you may not like them, but that's okay. Their work may still have value, just in the same way that you might like something, but it may not be good for you. You may like to eat a lot of sugar. It doesn't mean it's good for you. Well, the reverse is the case. You may not like something, not like it, but it could be absolutely brilliant in a wider context. And see, I've always borne that in mind because I don't come from any partisan belief. I grew up surrounded by people in the New Age movement. And within a very short time, I wanted nothing to do with them. I was right in the heart of it. Back and quite from an earlier time as well.
What
We're
is
talking about
what is the New Age movement? I mean, how would that be defined?
Well, that's again, a whole subject in itself. Of course, the New Age movement I'm talking about would have been started by. Oh, well, it's hard to say. From an American context, you've got the Reverend Paul Solomon, who I have a lot of respect for. My own grandfather was involved with that, Tara Singh. And then you have the East Coast variety, like the Barbara Marx Hubbards, and you have, it might be, you could take it back to even people like Edgar Cayce and so forth and so on. But I would always define the negative aspect of it. All I can do is talk from personal experience. I can only say that a couple of the things I didn't like personally was that I'm a very good reader of people, and therefore, if somebody's personality, way of living, I don't even know what you really call it, doesn't jive with what they're talking about. And I don't mean them having bullet holes. I don't mind that. I don't mind a few rough edges. You know what I'm saying? It's fine.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not talking about those superficial things. I'm talking about something a little bit deeper than that. If I have even the hair's breadth feeling that somebody's a charlatan, or somebody's not living up to what they're meant to be espousing, it's almost like I break into a sweat. I can feel it. And I found that a lot in the New Age movement. I thought, and I ended up, later on I'd be able to put language to it, and then realize, okay, this thing is just riddled with charlatans, even though there's some fantastic people within that movement. But the trouble was then that in my personal life, my personal destiny, the people that influenced me the most, personally I'm talking about now, so I can't speak for anybody else, turned out to be people who were not even remotely connected with the New Age movement, yet they were great sacred geometrists, or they were great teachers or artists or poets or thinkers or writers or whatever. And then I started to realize that, wait a minute, there's this big promissory note over here